Seattle, quite simply, is a pleasant place to live. Moderate temperatures, moderate weather, nothing too extreme, which is a bit ironic because Seattle is leading the charge to combat what other places across the country are now feeling every year, the extreme effects of climate change.
It was a very conscious decision to look to 2050, sort of recognizing that climate change is a long-term game and that something as ambitious as carbon neutrality is not going to happen overnight.
The city is drafting a vision, a climate action plan that looks nearly 40 years into the future, specifically to deal with the effects of climate change.
Carbon neutrality, the way the city defines it, is zero net greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Two big areas are in transportation, and particularly road transportation, and in building energy.
Transportation is a key area to reduce carbon emissions, the leading cause of global warming. One of the greenest corridors in the city is Dexter Avenue North, where on any given weekday, bicycles almost rival the number of cars on the road. One of those riders is Seattle City Council member Mike O'Brien.
You know, I first biked to work on Bike to Work Day, I think it was 13 years ago, as people started to recognize that, wow, this isn't some theoretical exercise about climate change. The impacts are actually happening in our country, in our city right now. You know, in December, the highest tide ever recorded in the city of Seattle happened. And of course, Hurricane Sandy in the Northeast. All these things are indications of what the world's going to look like as the planet starts to warm up.
10% of work trips today are on bike or foot. Over 60% are still in cars. But those numbers are changing. With an expansion of light rail and streetcars, more pedestrian and biking corridors, new technologies, and more people living in the urban core, carbon emissions will decline. Seattle is in the middle of a building boom. Throughout the downtown core, you can see construction heading sky high, buildings that consume a lot of energy. And one of those buildings stands apart from the rest, the new Bullitt Center. It describes itself in one very efficient statement: the greenest building in the world.
What we tried to do in ways that most other buildings don't was to approach everything. So we tried to be just as good as we could be in terms of energy, of water, of toxic materials, of the kinds of wood that we used.
The roof is an oversized network of solar panels, enough to power the entire building.
We take windows all the way up to the ceiling so that you can get just as much sunlight as far into the room as possible. And we've arranged the building so that every working desk inside the building is no more than 30 feet away from a working window, so that everybody gets direct access to fresh air and to daylight. We should use about 1/4 the amount of energy for all purposes. This just isn't heating and cooling, but for everything, that the average building that is built to code under the new tough Seattle Energy Code would use.
Where the Bullitt Center leads, others will follow. But the city is also committed to making sure its existing buildings become more energy efficient as well.
I'm actually a retired climate scientist, and retired from that largely because I wanted to get more directly involved with the civic life of my community in a way that would affect eventually, or play a role in affecting climate change, the problem of global warming.
One obvious tool for mitigating carbon emissions is protecting urban forests. Trees breathe in carbon, breathe out fresh air, and these trees have stewards looking out for them all year long.
We've got to make urban areas really attractive places to live, because people living densely in urban areas have a much lower carbon footprint, a much lower impact on the environment generally.
Not far from North Beach Park, people stream into a Sustainable Ballard open house on a recent Sunday morning.
Today we're doing an open house, showing off different projects, trying to get more people signed up to participate in any of the ones that strike their fancy, and we're encouraging people to come in and bring their own ideas, and then we just support the energy that's in the community toward sustainable activities.
Tearing up of a grass yard and creating a garden. It could be building a chicken coop. That would be the concept, and then it's how do we develop this, and how do we get people involved, and what kinds of skills would be involved.
We started out with 3 or 4 projects, and now As you can see, there are 12 projects that we've thought of so far this year, and I'm sure more to come.
The Climate Action Plan is ambitious and massive, working on every front from major urban initiatives to neighborhood grassroots efforts and even Ivy Root efforts. But hand in hand with the plan's ultimate goal of zero carbon emissions is an overriding philosophy.
We're not trying to squeeze the last conceivable ton per dollar of carbon out of the air so much as squeeze as much of it as we can while building a city that is attractive and livable and vibrant and productive. And so it is in some ways a much more comprehensive approach that we're taking this time.
The strategies and the community that we'll build in addressing climate change is an awesome place to live.
Watch CityStream Thursday nights at 7 on the Seattle Channel, or get video on demand and podcasts anytime at seattlechannel.org.